The year is 1470. In the mountains of Thessaly, a bell rings one final time across a valley that will never hear it again. Inside the convent of St. Catherine, 23 women kneel in prayer. Their lips move in unison, forming words they've spoken every morning for years. But this morning, the words taste different, like ash, like goodbye. Outside the stone walls, the horizon bleeds red. Not from sunrise, but from the banners of an empire that has already swallowed kingdoms whole. The Ottoman army doesn't march. It flows like a river of steel and fire, erasing everything in its path. Sister Elani, the abbess, clutches a silver crucifix that has survived 3 generations. Her hands tremble, but not from fear. She knows what's coming. They all do. What they don't know, what no one could imagine, is that death would have been a mercy. Because what happened next wasn't written in any history book you studied in school. It was buried, erased, hidden beneath centuries of silence. If you've ever wondered why certain stories vanish from history while others are told again and again, you're in the right place. Here on we dig into the archives the world forgot. Missionary letters, Ottoman state records, testimonies buried in Vatican vaults. For centuries, the official story of St. Catherine's was simple. A remote convent was captured during the Ottoman conquest of Thessaly. Its nuns were taken as slaves. A tragedy, yes, but a footnote in an empire's expansion. It was considered routine. Common, even. But when we, as historians, began to cross-reference the archives, we found something that didn't add up. A discrepancy. A dark piece of math. The story wasn't simple. It was a cover-up. Our investigation begins not with the Ottomans, but with their victims. The first piece of evidence? The convent's own baptismal and vow registry. A document preserved for centuries in a dusty Vatican vault. A desperate plea for memory, sent by a fleeing priest just weeks before the attack. The registry is meticulous. It lists every woman in the convent by name and age. And on that final morning, as the banners gathered on the horizon, the registry is clear. There were 23 women inside those walls. 23 souls. This number is our anchor. 23. Remember it, because the men who came to destroy them were counting too. Now we turn to the second piece of evidence. This one comes from the conquerors. We move from the Vatican to Istanbul, to the Topkapi Palace archives, where the ledgers of an empire are kept. In 1987, during a recataloguing of 15th century shipping manifests, historians found a small, unassuming entry. It stated from the 7th day of the Thessalian campaign, logged at the port of Volos. The manifest is cold. It is precise. It is the record of a galley bound for the imperial household in Constantinople. It lists cargo, bales of silk, barrels of oil, and human beings. And near the bottom, a single line item, written in neat Ottoman script. Religious captives, female, 18. 18. This is the central mystery. The convent registry says 23. The Ottoman shipping ledger says 18. You don't need to be a mathematician to see the problem. Somewhere between the shattered gates of that convent and the docks at the port of Volos, 5 women, 5 human beings, vanished from the official record. Where did they go? The easy answer is that they died, that they collapsed on the road, or were killed resisting. But if that were true, they would be in the records. The Ottoman bureaucracy was, above all, meticulous. Every asset was tracked. A death was recorded. An escape was noted. But these 5 women, they aren't listed as dead. They aren't listed as escaped. They are simply not listed at all. They were subtracted from the equation, wiped from the ledger, as if they had never existed. This wasn't a clerical error. This was an erasure. History, as it's officially written, is the story of ledgers, of manifests, of reports filed by the victors. And by this official history, 5 women were simply a rounding error, a cost of doing business. But here we read between the lines. We hunt in the margins. We look for the ghosts. Our investigation isn't about the 18 women who made it to the ship. Their story is a tragedy, and we will tell it. But the mystery, the crime, lies with the 5 who didn't. What happened to them was so brutal or so methodical that it was deliberately kept off the books. You don't hide an accidental death. You hide an execution. You don't hide a simple escape. You hide a systematic atrocity. To find the truth, we have to ignore the manifest from the port. That document is the end of the cover-up, not the beginning. We have to go back to the convent, back to the moment the bell tower fell, and back to the man who held the quill. The man whose job it was not just to conquer these women, but to erase them. His name, recorded in the campaign archives, was Hassan Pasha. He was not a simple soldier. He was a specialist, an architect of erasure. And he was about to test his theories on the 23 women of St. Catherine's. To understand Hassan Pasha, you must first understand his master. 17 years earlier, in 1453, Sultan Mehmed II, just 21 years old, did the impossible. He conquered Constantinople. For 1,000 years, that city had been the jewel of Christendom, the queen of cities. Its walls were legendary, believed to be protected by God himself. And in 53 days, it was gone. The shockwave shattered the Christian world. But it was what Mehmed did after the conquest that reveals the policy that would doom the nuns of St. Catherine's. He rode his horse directly into the Hagia Sophia, the greatest cathedral in the world. He stopped his men from looting it, and then he gave the order. The crosses were to come down, the bells were to be melted, the priceless mosaics depicting Christ and the saints were to be plastered over with gypsum. Within a week, an imam was chanting the call to prayer from its pulpit. Mehmed understood something most conquerors don't. You don't truly defeat a people by killing them. You defeat them by erasing who they were. You don't just break their bodies. You break their memory. He saw that every church bell that still rang in his new empire, every cross that still cast a shadow, was an act of defiance, a living reminder that the old world refused to die. And every monk, every priest, every nun who still prayed in Latin or Greek, was a soldier in a war of identity. So the Sultan made a decision, a new state policy. If these remnants of faith will not convert, they will disappear. But not through public massacre. Massacre is messy. Massacre creates martyrs. And martyrs inspire resistance. Songs are written, stories are told. The dead become immortal. Now, the Ottomans, under Mehmed, perfected something far more cold, far more elegant, something that left no songs, no stories, no memory. Erasure. The complete systematic removal of an identity from the ledger of history. This was the strategy, and Hassan Pasha was its most trusted accountant. By 1470, Hassan Pasha's strategy had been tested and refined. Greek monasteries in Morea, Serbian convents in the Balkans. He didn't just burn them, he converted some. He abandoned others. But the pattern was always the same. First came the offer, then came the silence. The convent of St. Catherine, isolated on its hillside, was about to become just another test case. But these women didn't know they were test cases. These weren't warriors. They were women who had spent their entire lives in prayer. Their weapons were rosaries. Their armor was faith. Sister Elani, the abbess, had been in charge for 12 years. She had come to the convent not to escape the world, but to make sense of it. She was their protector. Sister Magdalena was 19. She had taken her vows only 2 years before, her hands still bearing the calluses from her father's farm. The convent was the only place she had felt safe since her family was killed in a raid. She was the memory of the world they had left. Sister Theodoris was 70. She had outlived 2 abbesses, an emperor, and more wars than she could count. She had stopped fearing death decades ago. She was their resolve. These were the women Hassan Pasha was sent to erase. The first cannonball hits just after dawn. It's a calculated shot. It doesn't strike the chapel. It doesn't hit their dormitory. It strikes the bell tower. This is our first clue. This is not a savage assault. It is a surgical procedure. The army's first target is their voice. The sound is apocalyptic. Stone explodes. Iron shrieks against iron. The bell that has rung every morning for 140 years. The bell that structured their entire existence. Shatters mid-swing. The pieces rain down onto the courtyard where the sisters grow herbs for healing. But Sister Elani doesn't scream. She stands, crucifix raised high, and begins to sing. The Kyrie eleison. Lord have mercy. One by one, the others join her. 23 voices rising against the roar of an empire. A voice for a voice. But empires don't listen to songs. By midday, the main gates are breached. The oak doors, thick as a man's chest, splinter into pieces. The nuns huddled together in the chapel, their hymn fading to a whisper. They are waiting for the massacre. But the massacre doesn't come. Instead, Ottoman soldiers pour into the courtyard. And they are not the frenzied berserkers of propaganda. They are calm, methodical. They move with a chilling efficiency. And most of them don't even have their swords drawn. They are carrying ledgers, quills, ink pots. This is our first breadcrumb clue. This is not a raid. It is an audit. Hassan Pasha's men move through the convent like clerks, not conquerors, counting tapestries, cataloging silver candlesticks, assessing the health of the livestock, and counting the nuns. 23. They are now officially assets of the state. A translator steps forward. A local Greek man, his eyes on the ground, his voice shaking with the shame of his role. He reads from a scroll. By order of Sultan Mehmed II, all subjects of the conquered territories must submit to the authority of the Sublime Porte. Those who convert will be granted protection. Those who refuse will face the consequences of rebellion. Sister Elani steps forward. Her face is pale but serene. She speaks not to the soldiers, but to the translator, in Greek so clear that everyone understands. Tell your Sultan that we have already given our lives to a king. We have nothing left to surrender. The officer in charge, Hassan Pasha himself, stands watching from the courtyard. His name, as we found it in the archives, is synonymous with this cold, bureaucratic warfare. He doesn't respond with anger. He responds with something far more chilling. A smile. He knows something the nuns don't. This defiance is not a setback. It is step one. He knows that faith, like bone, can be broken without being seen. That night, the women are locked inside their own chapel. No food, no water, just darkness, and the sound of soldiers outside, laughing, eating, living. Hassan Pasha opens his own campaign ledger. He makes his first entry. Day 1, 23 assets. Stubborn. The softening begins. The first night is a test of nerves. The chapel stones, so familiar and comforting in prayer, now feel like a tomb. The air is cold, but the real chill comes from the sounds outside. The laughter of soldiers, the crackle of their fires, the smell of roasting meat drifting through the cracks in the door. It is the sound of life, offered as a torment. 2 sisters, younger ones from Corinth, begin to weep in the corner. Their sobs are quiet at first. Then they echo off the stone walls, threatening to crack the resolve of the entire group. This is what Hassan Pasha is waiting for, the sound of breaking. But then, another sound emerges from the darkness. It is Sister Magdalena, the 19-year-old. She is barely more than a girl, but her voice is steady. She begins to whisper a psalm, the 23rd. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Her voice is faint, barely audible, but in the suffocating silence, it cuts through the fear. Then another nun joins her. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Then another, and another, until the weeping stops, replaced by a murmur of prayer. This is the moment the Ottomans underestimated them. These women had spent their entire lives preparing for suffering, fasting, vigils in the cold, hours of silence, submission to something greater than themselves. What the soldiers saw as torture, the nuns saw as their daily discipline. Hassan Pasha is patient. He has seen this before. He lets them have their night of prayer. On the second day, the heavy doors unbar. A servant enters. He is not a soldier. He is a local Greek, his face a mask of shame. He sets down a wooden tray. On it is fresh bread, steaming slightly, a skin of clean water. Real food. He sets it down without a word and leaves. The doors bolt again. The nuns stare at it. Their throats are dry. Their stomachs are hollow. The younger sisters look to Elani, desperation in their eyes. This is a new kind of torture. It is hope. But Sister Theodoris, the eldest, speaks first. Her voice is a dry rasp. It is a trick. They want us to take it, to feel gratitude, to soften. Sister Elani looks at the bread, then at her sisters. She nods. Then we fast. They don't touch the food. By the third day, their lips are cracked and bleeding. Their hands shake. The younger sisters can barely stand. But they don't break. The bread sits on the floor, untouched, a monument to their defiance. Hassan Pasha watches from the courtyard, arms crossed. He's impressed. He's frustrated. And perhaps, just for a moment, something close to respect flickers across his face. But respect doesn't change strategy. The doors open again. This time it's not a servant. It's Hassan himself. He speaks in Turkish, and the translator follows behind him like a shadow. "You are not criminals," the translator says. "You are not enemies. You are simply mistaken. The Sultan is merciful. He offers you new lives, new names, protection. All you must do is speak the words, silence. The only sound is the ragged breathing of the weakened women." Or, Hassan says, and he pauses, letting the next words settle. "You can come with us to Constantinople. There the Sultan himself will hear your case. Perhaps he will be moved by your conviction." A spark of hope. Elani looks at the others. Constantinople. The heart of their old world. A chance. Hassan Pasha sees the look, and he closes the trap. "But the road is long. It is nearly 80 miles to the sea, and the weak do not survive it." It's not a threat. It's a promise. It's the out his ledger requires. He is giving them a choice between a fast death, conversion, and a slow one, the march. Sister Elani looks at her sisters. Some are barely conscious. Some are staring at the floor, trying to find strength in the stone. She knows what he is offering. She turns back to Hassan. Her voice is a whisper, but it carries the weight of all 23 of them. "We will walk." The smile returns to his face. "Good. We leave at dawn." That night, the nuns hold each other in the darkness. No one speaks, but Sister Magdalena begins to hum. A simple hymn they sang at Vespers. One by one, the others join her. Outside, the soldiers hear it. Some of them pause. Some of them look away. One of them, years later, will tell his grandson about the women who sang themselves to death. But that story will be forgotten too. For now, the hymn rises through the cracks in the chapel walls. A prayer, a plea, a final declaration. We are still here. At dawn on the fourth day, the gates of St. Catherine's open for the last time. 23 women, hands bound with rope, walk out into the sunlight. They walk past the shattered bell tower. They walk past the graves of their sisters. They walk south, toward the coast. No carts, no horses, just their feet and the dust and the sun that shows no mercy. Hassan Pasha watches them go. then makes a new note in his campaign ledger. 23 assets, mobile. Transport to Volos initiated. The erasure has begun. The road is not a road. It is an ordeal. The soldiers don't rush them. They don't need to. The road itself is the punishment. The stones cut their feet. The sun is relentless. The women who have spent their entire lives in the cool, shaded cloisters of a mountain convent are now exposed, force-marched under an open sky that shows no mercy. The dust coats their throats. Their simple wool habits become instruments of torture, heavy, hot, and suffocating. They walk in silence, not the silence of prayer. This is the silence of endurance, the silence of women who have already made their choice and are now simply facing the consequence. By the second day, the first one falters. Sister Irene. She's 62. Her knees, arthritic and swollen for years, have been failing for a long time. She stumbles, tries to stand, but her legs won't hold her. She collapses onto the rocky path. The column stops. The soldiers wait, annoyed. Sister Magdalena, the 19-year-old, and another nun, Sister Anna, break formation. They try to lift Irene between them. They carry her for the next 3 miles, their own bodies shaking with the strain, their arms screaming in protest. But the weight is too much. When they finally stop for the night, Irene is unconscious, her breathing shallow. By morning, she's gone. She died in her sleep, by the side of the road. The sisters gather around her. They have no tools, no time for a proper burial. They scrape at the hard-packed earth with their hands, covering her body with stones and dirt. They whisper the prayers for the dead. The soldiers watch, indifferent. Hassan Pasha dismounts from his horse. He walks over to the crude grave. He looks at it, then opens his ledger. He makes a neat, precise note. 1 asset expired. Cause, exhaustion. He closes the book. 22 remaining. His ledger is balanced. This death was anticipated. It was part of the plan. On the 4th day, it happens again. Sister Callista. She is a nun who hasn't spoken a single word since the siege began. No one knows if it's from trauma or defiance. She simply stops walking. Right in the middle of the road, she sits down, crosses her legs, closes her eyes, and begins to pray. A soldier yells at her. He kicks her boot. She doesn't move. He draws his sword, places the flat of it against her neck. She doesn't flinch. She is immobile, a rock of faith in the middle of their path. Hassan Pasha rides up. He is annoyed, not by her faith, but by her inefficiency. This is a delay. He gives a signal. The column moves on. They just walk around her. They leave her there, alone in the wilderness, to the sun, or the wolves, or the slavers who follow the army. Hassan Pasha makes another note in his ledger. 1 asset abandoned. Cause, refusal to move. The books are balanced again. 21 remaining. This is what history records. 2 deaths, accounted for. Tragic, but expected. This is the story the ledgers tell. 21 women continued the march. But this is where the official record begins to lie. Hassan's ledger is clean. 21 remaining. But this is where the real history begins. The history that is never written down, because it is an admission of a crime. We know from the ship's manifest, our anchor in Act 1, that only 18 women made it to the port of Volos. Hassan's ledger, so meticulous about the deaths of Irene and Callista, suddenly becomes silent. There are no more entries for exhaustion, no more notes of abandonment. 3 women. We know their names from the convent registry: Sister Anna, Sister Sophia, Sister Helena. They simply vanish from the page between the 4th day and the 7th. How do we know what happened? The official record is a brick wall, but history is not just found in the ledgers of conquerors. It's found in the margins, in the whispered accounts of witnesses, in private letters that were never meant to survive. For this part of the story, we leave the Ottoman archives. We go to Venice, to the Archivio di Stato, the state archives. Here, in 2003, buried in a bundle of commercial papers, a letter was found. It was written by a Venetian merchant named Giovanni Loredan, who was at the port of Volos waiting for a shipment of silk when Hassan Pasha's column was due to arrive. His letter, written to his brother, describes what he heard from the military camp on the hills above the port. It was the night of the 6th day. The nuns were just 1 day's march away. Hassan Pasha's patience, it seems, had run out. Their silent, defiant marching, their refusal to break was, to him, a failure of his strategy. He needed to break them. Not just their bodies, their souls. That night, according to the merchant's terrified account, Hassan Pasha gave a new order, an order that would never be written down, an order for his janissaries. He ordered the 3 youngest remaining nuns, Anna, Sophia, and Helena, dragged from the group. We don't need to imagine what happened next. The merchant's letter doesn't describe the act. It describes the sounds that echoed down the valley. And it describes what his informants saw. We see it through the eyes of the remaining sisters. We see Sister Magdalena, the 19-year-old, turn her head, her hands covering her ears, her body shaking as she vomits onto the dirt. We see the older nuns, their eyes shut so tightly that tears seem to form, and we see Sister Elani, forced to watch. Her eyes open, unblinking, a living witness to an atrocity designed to break her and to terrorize the others into submission. The merchant's letter is blunt. By morning, the 3 women were gone, thrown into a ditch. No note in the ledger, no grave. They were simply erased. 21 had become 18. It was that morning, the morning of the 7th day, the morning after Hassan Pasha had proven his absolute power by erasing 3 women from the earth. He wasn't finished. He had one more lesson. He had terrorized the group. Now he would break their leader. A soldier calls for her by name. Sister Elani. She is brought to Hassan Pasha's tent, alone. What happens next is not described in any Ottoman record. An act of personal, brutal power is not a bureaucratic statistic. It is, again, our Venetian merchant, Giovanni Loredan, who provides the testimony. He was watching the camp from the edge of the port city at dawn, waiting to see the column of captives arrive. He writes in his letter, "I saw them bring her back out of the Pasha's tent just after sunrise. She could not walk." This is the hidden 18+ of history, the acts of violence that are so total, so devastating, They can only be measured by their aftermath. Loredan's letter continues. 2 soldiers carried her. Her eyes, God forgive me, her eyes were open, but she was not inside them anymore. They had taken her soul and left the body to wander. They didn't just break her, they recostumed her. They stripped her of her black wool habit, the symbol of her life and her faith, and dressed her in fine, bright silk, a trophy, a public convert. They paraded her through the camp, a warning to the 17 remaining women who were huddled in terror. But here is the final, heartbreaking act of defiance. Loredan, the merchant, writes, "When I passed close to the column, I heard her lips moving. She was still praying, silently, in Latin." They had not broken her faith. They had simply taken her body. This is the Ottoman strategy perfected. They didn't want a martyr. Martyrs inspire. They wanted a ghost, a living, walking, silent warning to anyone else who thought faith could stand against the empire. When Sister Elani was placed at the front of the line, the group was complete. The 5 missing women were now accounted for. 1 dead of exhaustion, 1 abandoned to the elements, and 3 erased in a single night of calculated terror. Hassan Pasha's work was done. When the column reached the port of Volos hours later, his ledger was finally correct. He could now officially hand his assets over to the Navy. 18 religious captives. The story of the 5 was over, buried in the mud and shame of the road. Now, the story of the 18 was about to begin. At the port of Volos, the 17 remaining nuns and their broken abbess are loaded onto a galley. A massive warship, its belly filled with oars, its deck crowded with soldiers. This is not a passenger ship. This is a vessel designed for control. The ship's manifest, the one we found in 1987, is the final, tidy summary of Hassan Pasha's brutal work. It lists them not by name, but by number. Religious captives, female, 18. Destination, imperial household. Purpose, domestic service and conversion. That word, service, is doing a lot of work. The 5 missing women are now just a ghost in the bureaucracy. Hassan Pasha's ledger is clean. The empire's ledger is clean. The crime is complete, and the paperwork is filed. The voyage lasts 12 days. For women who have never left their mountain valley, the sea is not a symbol of freedom. It is a chaotic, rolling prison. Storms lash the deck. Salt spray stings their cracked lips. The ship pitches and rolls, and the women, chained to the benches, vomit until there's nothing left. They are cargo, less valuable than the silk, more troublesome than the oil. At night, the darkness is total. But in that darkness, a sound. It is Sister Magdalena, her voice a faint whisper, barely audible over the crashing waves and the groaning wood. She is reciting the Psalms, from memory. Her voice is the only anchor they have. Sister Elani is with them, but she is not. She sits upright, chained like the others, still draped in the mocking silk. She stares at the horizon. She does not speak. She does not eat. She is a living ghost, a masterpiece of Hassan Pasha's art. When the ship finally enters the Bosphorus, the sisters see the skyline of Constantinople rise before them. Domes, minarets, walls that seem to stretch forever. The city gleams in the dawn light like a blade. For centuries, it had been the city of the world's desire, the bastion of their faith. Now, it would become their cage. From the docks, they are marched through narrow streets. People stop to stare. Christian nuns paraded as captives are a rarity, a special kind of trophy. They are led past the ancient walls, through the imperial district, past gardens where fountains sing and peacocks scream. And then they are taken to the Topkapi Palace, but not to the grand halls, not to the sunlit courtyards. They are taken beneath, down stone steps that spiral into darkness, through tunnels that smell of damp earth and decay, to a place that doesn't officially exist. The great doors of the palace close behind them, and for the next 541 years, history hears nothing. 18 women are swallowed by the silence. The ledger is closed. The erasure is total. The case, it seems, has gone cold forever. Or so the empire believed. For 541 years, the erasure held. The silence was absolute. The Ottoman Empire, the machine that had crushed St. Catherine's, grew to span 3 continents. It reached the gates of Vienna. It rewrote the laws of the known world. Then it too, like all empires, grew old. It sickened. And in 1922, it dissolved into memory. The sultans turned to dust. The armies became stories. The Topkapi Palace, once the center of absolute power, became a museum. Tourists walk its halls, millions of them. They take pictures of the silks, the jewels, the empty harem. They walk across the first courtyard, past the ancient church of Hagia Irini, unaware that they are walking just a few feet above a sealed tomb, unaware of what lies beneath. The silence held until 2011. It began, as these things often do, not with a quest for truth, but with routine maintenance. Restoration work was underway on the foundations of an old service wing, a building tourists never see. A section of the lower foundations was subsiding. Engineers were tapping the walls, checking for structural integrity. And one of the walls rang hollow. They assumed it was a collapsed Byzantine cistern, an empty space that needed to be filled with concrete to stabilize the building above. Standard procedure. They brought in ground-penetrating radar just to map the void before they drilled. But the radar showed something else. Not a collapsed cavern. It showed a small, enclosed, intact space. An anomaly. A room that didn't exist on any blueprint. A room that had been deliberately, methodically sealed. The discovery of a sealed room on the grounds of Topkapi is not a simple matter. For weeks, bureaucracy took over. Was it Byzantine? Was it Ottoman? Was it dangerous? Finally, a team of archaeologists received permission to make a small exploratory hole. They drilled through 3 feet of solid stone and 15th century mortar. This room wasn't just forgotten. It was entombed. They fed a fiber optic camera through the opening into the blackness. The air that hissed out was stale, smelling of damp earth and something indescribable, like extinguished candles. The camera showed nothing, just darkness. They widened the hole, a process that took 2 more days. When it was large enough, the lead archaeologist, a flashlight strapped to his helmet, eased himself into the void. The dust of centuries swirled in his light. He was standing in a small, damp stone cell. It was cold. It was silent. A forgotten cistern, perhaps. But as he turned, and his light panned across the walls, he stopped. Cold. Scratched into the stone were crosses, dozens of them. Small, crude, carved with fingernails or shards of broken pottery. The archaeologist reached out a gloved hand. He touched one. It was real. He called for the rest of his team. They entered the room one by one, their lights cutting the ancient darkness. The walls were covered in them, a frantic, desperate, beautiful testament. They found a small ledge, and on it, traces of wax. Not the fine beeswax of the palace. This was rough, mixed with herbs. The kind of candles nuns made in convents. This was not a cistern. This was a chapel. This was their room. For months, maybe years, the 18 surviving women, including the ghost of Sister Elani, had lived beneath the palace, working as silent servants by day, scrubbing floors, washing linens, invisible. But at night, when the palace slept, they gathered here, in this forgotten room, in total darkness. And they prayed. They had no priest, no altar, no Bible, just memory. And they carved their faith into the stone, one scratch at a time, knowing no one would ever see it. Then, in the farthest corner, almost at the floor, the lead archaeologist's light caught something else. It wasn't another cross. It was a different kind of carving. A small, simple etching of a bird in flight. Sister Magdalena's mark. The girl whose hands still remembered her father's farm. And beside it, the final piece of the puzzle. The answer to our mystery. She had kept her own ledger. The true ledger. The archaeologists stared, their lights converging on one spot. They counted the small vertical lines. There were not 18. She had carved 23. 23 tally marks. One for every sister who had knelt in prayer that final morning in Thessaly. This is it. The smoking gun in our 500-year-old cold case. Hassan Pasha's ledger, with its neat entry of 18, was a lie of omission. Sister Magdalena's ledger, carved in stone, was the truth. The archaeologists examining the wall noted that the first 18 lines were uniform, carved with patience. But the last 5, the 5 that represented the missing, they were different, deeper, more erratic, as if carved with a desperate, furious grief. The lines for Irene, for Callista, and for Anna, Sophia, and Helena. They had died on the road, been abandoned, been murdered and erased by the state. But in this secret chapel, in the dark, they were not forgotten. Sister Magdalena had ensured that the entire convent, all 23 of them, were present in this final, silent act of resistance. The empire had erased their names, but it had failed. Magdalena had kept the true count. And then, just beneath the bird and the 23 lines, the archaeologists found the last carving. 4 words, etched in Latin, a language the conquerors had tried to silence. Lux in Tenebris, Lucet. The light shines in the darkness. So why does this story matter? Because it's not about religion. It's not even about the Ottomans. It's about what power does when it tries to erase people, and what happens when those people refuse to disappear. The Ottoman Empire lasted 600 years. It conquered 3 continents. It rewrote maps, languages, entire cultures. It turned the greatest cathedral in Christendom into a mosque. They ruled from the gates of Vienna to the deserts of Arabia. But they couldn't erase 23 scratches on a wall. Think about that. An empire with armies, cannons, endless resources, and the will to reshape the world. Against women with nothing but fingernails, broken pottery, and a memory they refused to let die. And in the end, the women won. Not in the way empires measure victory. They didn't reclaim their convent. They didn't convert their captors. They didn't live to see freedom. We know from Ottoman records of 1482 that there was a cleansing of the palace staff under the new Sultan. The scratches on the wall stop abruptly. The women were disposed of. They lost their lives, but they won the war for memory. There is a popular lie we are all told, that history is written by the victors. This discovery proves that is false. History is written by the victors, but memory is kept by the survivors. And sometimes survival looks like a cross carved in the dark where no one was supposed to see it. Sometimes it looks like a bird. And 23 lines, a silent scream that outlasts the empire that caused it. Centuries later, we found it. We, the jury of a future they could not have imagined, found their testimony. The Ottoman Empire is gone now, dissolved in 1922. Its sultans are dust, its armies are memory. The palace still stands, but it's a museum now. Tourists walk its halls taking pictures, unaware of what lies just inches beneath their feet. But those crosses remain. And that Latin phrase, barely visible after 500 years, still speaks. Lux in Tenebris, Lucet. The light shines in the darkness. It's from the Gospel of John, a verse about a light that cannot be extinguished, about a truth that survives even when everything else is taken away. Sister Magdalena carved those words, knowing she would never leave that palace, knowing her name would be forgotten, knowing the world would move on without her. But she carved them anyway, because she understood something that empires never do. You can conquer land. You can rewrite history. You can erase names from ledgers and bury bodies in unmarked graves. But you cannot kill what people carry inside them. You've just witnessed one of history's darkest truths. The nuns of St. Catherine were meant to disappear. That was the plan. Erase them, break them, turn them into ghosts or converts or a footnote in a ship's manifest that read 18. But they didn't disappear. They're still here, in those crosses, in that Latin phrase, in the 23 lines that prove their memory was stronger than the empire's ink. And now, they're here with you, because you listened, because you remembered, because you refused to let their silence be the final word. If stories like this remind you how fragile humanity is, how easily voices can be erased, then subscribe to Crimson Historians. Keep the past alive, because some voices deserve to be heard, even if they were silenced centuries ago. Especially then.